Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'd like to look at the economic power for the Middle East and just briefly look at the capacity for the missile defense for these countries, especially this East Mediterranean, the White Sea, east shore of the White Sea, and Iran. So the economic power of this area in the Middle East. So the Middle East this is a center mass here with two rivers. And on one side of the rivers is this very desert-like area, including this part here, Egypt, and even up into this Libya, Algeria, this tremendous desert. And then on the other side of the rivers is this very elevated, mountainous, and a very plateaued area, landmass. So the most populated countries in the Middle East are number one, Egypt with 110 million people, Turkey with about 90 million people, and Iran with about 90 million people. The biggest cities in this area are Cairo with 15 million, Istanbul with 15 million, and Tehran with 15 million. And the second largest cities in this area have half of this number, and they are Baghdad with 9 million and Riyadh with 8 million. The second largest populations of the countries in this area are also Iraq and Saudi Arabia, where the second largest cities are located. Iraq has about 40 million people in the population, and Saudi Arabia has about 40 million people in its population. So they were equally supportive of life. And the next largest cities for all of this area are half of the size of the biggest cities of Iraq and Saudi Arabia. And the country's overall total population is significantly smaller than Iraq and Saudi Arabia, which, as we said, was about 40 million. So the next largest cities in the area are Beirut and Amman. Beirut has about 3.5 million people, and Amman has 4 million people. And it's significant that Beirut and Amman also serve as sort of like a geographical metropolis kind of focusing, because they had supported also other very large cities in proximity to them. That is significant economically. So Beirut has the only other power of Lebanon, and rivaling in size is Tripoli with 1.5 million or nearly 2 million people there. So that would put 5 million people of the 8 million people who live in Lebanon, like basically more than half of the population of Lebanon, into those two cities in a very close range of each other. So this is economically focalizing humanity into these cities. So Beirut will be and continue to forever be the economic base for this area. It will always be able to focalize that the population to allow economic power to focalize there. And similarly for Amman, with the 4 million people in Amman, it will continue to be a focalizing area for the population, It has Zarqa with over 1 million people there and absolutely adjacent to it, and Irbid very near with it to it with another 2 million. So it's tremendously focalizing the populations here. We cannot say the same for this shore where there is a lot of turmoil and entirely like economic shutdown. It's a wartime economy coming into this is the situation here. Gaza is the largest city on this area of the shore. It has 2.5 million people, or has about 2 million people, 1.5 million there, and they have been entirely displaced. So the largest city of this area, Gaza City, has been fully displaced. And the only other city in this area that of that size is inland. It's Jerusalem. It's here, and it has 1.5 million. So it was half the size. And that is the next largest city of this area. And there is another city half the size. It's Tel Aviv here at the shore. So the two cities that are actually economic rivaling powers of this Middle Eastern economic infrastructure, Riyadh and Baghdad. So these are the next two largest countries. They are Iraq here and Saudi Arabia here. They have about 40 million people. Their largest city are Riyadh with 8 million and Baghdad with 9 million. And you can see that want to focus some you can see the difference economically for this area is that Riyadh is inland. It's landlocked by deserts where you can't focalize economic power. So everything has to be transported out. And that is not the same for Baghdad. Although it's not very navigable here from Basra upstream towards Baghdad, it's you can focalize economic power to an extent in the southern region of Iraq. And most of the power is focalized here at the end. It's a city named Kuwait City, and it's a part of an independent country named Kuwait. And that is economically focalized power there. There's several million people there. But the strongest and most strategic economic power is of this area is Baghdad. It's similarly landlocked, but it's essential in that it's at the intersection of two rivers. So here at the city of Baghdad, looking westward is the Euphrates River, and the Euphrates River goes parallel with the highways and here at, I believe it's Ramadi, we'll find out when this populates. The highway branches. One highway follows the river course for the Euphrates up into South Syria, and the other one follows across the desert for 1,500 kilometers to Jordan, to lower Jordan and into Amman. So that's where Amman would be. And then that powerful base for Jordan, which is half of his country, focalized into 3 cities here at Amman, are on the other side of the Dead Sea. So it's this big Rift Valley, like Dead Sea Valley. And on the other side is the more mountainous and freshwater area land of Israel and Palestine, and it has the cities Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Gaza City there on the other side of it. So from Baghdad, it is Ramadi, the city where the highway divides. So from Baghdad is the Blue Road to Gaziantep, and it is a river, and the river goes right through Syria, through the most important economic zones for Syria here in the south, up near Al Mayadeen, and this is where all of the oil fields here are, and Deir ez-Zor city, and here are this huge oil bases and the river Wise, and then further up more in Syria to Al Raqqa, which is also another important economic base, and the highway branches off towards Palmyra, where the important phosphate mines are, and it continues, the river continues up to cross the border of Syria and going into South Turkey, and it crosses eastward of Gaziantep, one of the biggest cities of South Turkey. So the river to the west of Baghdad is the river to Syria, and it's the river to Gaziantep. And it's significant that there is a huge economic, powerful chain of cities here along South Turkey that are the biggest cities, some of the biggest cities in Turkey, and with 1 or 2 million people each, a chain of 5 to 6 cities running along here, and they cross exactly between the two rivers along the chain. So it's almost as if it was a triangle it's an economic triangle, and at top of the triangle is those Turkish chain of cities, which include Batman, Mardin, Sanlurfa, and Gaziantep, Diyarbakir. They have 2 million people, Adaman, and it's all the way out to Iskenderun and Mersin. These cities are very big. They have over 2 million people in them. They have a huge highway that chains down through it. That the two rivers are straddled this desert area south of them. So the other river on the east of Baghdad is the river to Mosul and the river to Erbil. So here the river Tigris goes up to Mosul, and there's a branch out to Erbil, and these are another 4 million people between the two cities. So it's a huge focalization of economic strength there, economic potential. And this lower river valley area and deserts are met with elevations here towards the end where the rivers are derived from. The river heads are in the mountains, and they're flowing down, and they are all coming from this elevation of South Turkey, where the huge economic zone is, and that highway extends down into Erbil, powerful city, and it even goes eastward across the elevations of West Iran, and there is your biggest city of the area with 15 million people, and 15 million is just such a number that the people and the economy is just radiating. Just 15 million manpower mankind's strength just radiating out into the area all around Tehran. And in a sense of strategic defense, and based on the principle of, of economy for society. The size of the city is greatly influential in the ability for it to defend itself and to aggress. And at this time, we know that there is a competition in the Middle East, and that it's resulting in wars, kinetically and economically, and that they are sort of playing the politic of Iran versus Israel now in this geostrategical economical war, and that they are implying that we would see a economic and a kinetic war between Israel and Iran. And what do we know about Iran and Israel economically, and as far as their the power of their country? We know that Iran is 90 million and Israel is 9 million people. So we know that the country of Iran is 10 times bigger than Israel. And so that would be 10 times the people able to be put into this economic competition. We know that the biggest city of Israel is Jerusalem with 1 million people. And the biggest city of Iran is Tehran with 15 million people. We know that Tehran is one of 3 of the biggest powers in the Middle East, and that Israel is not one of them. It is nowhere near that power. We know that of the top 5 oil producing powers of the world, which is essential in understanding economic power, because the economy, the economic power is a pillar of it now is engines and machines, and therefore a pillar of it is fuel, access to fuel, and therefore the top 5 oil producing countries in the world are economically significant drivers in the world economy. And those happen to be Iran and Saudi Arabia, and also, so one of the top 5 I think are UAE. So, and Iraq in the past has been, so these are top 5 economically, and their populations are not equivalent, even though they hold this great economic world status with fuels. They don't have the population to try to wield, to economically throw their weight around. They don't have enough power. It's basically just having a lot of raw resource power and not a lot of ability to control that force, control those forces. No, they don't have enough economic governance of their power. So they never will. That we know that from a kinetic war analysis, I would say that the the capacity for the use of ballistic missiles is a lethal threat for every country in the world, still to this day. That the ability to use a ballistic missile, which is an anti-satellite missile, that capacity is something that we that the humanity has not been able or has not focused his ability or any kind of defense against it. So we do not have a capacity, a very large capacity in the world for stopping ballistic missiles. And a ballistic missile is basically a satellite missile. It's the size that they use to launch a satellite, and it's the size that you would use to intercept a satellite, and they're as big as a rocket. The rockets that they send, all the rockets that they send into outer space, they're just bigger than houses. They're just these massive, massive rockets, bigger than trees, and they are the ballistic missiles. They go up as high as the satellites, expending all of their fuel, and then they use the pull of gravity to and control guidance systems to navigate their way just with the flow of gravity down onto their targets. And they're very, very accurate due to the ability for computer calculation onto the target, which is, calculating, the computer calculations are much faster than the ability for a human brain to calculate. So these are increasing the precision capacity for this ballistic power. So we have this weapon systems are unable to be defended against, or we don't have appropriate defense systems for them worldwide. They do have some defense systems that are capable of intercepting ballistic missiles, maybe to an extent. Like maybe they could use 3 different missiles to intercept one ballistic missile. And if there was a large number of ballistic missiles being sent, then this defense interceptors are not really going to work as well, because you'll have so many targets in the air, and they use some heat seeking as well for their interception. So trying to heat seek in a fire field is nearly impossible, and wouldn't be able to guide these interceptors onto the target and make an effective defense system. So the only place that we've seen that has the ability to defend against ballistic missiles effectively was the Iron Dome in David Sling. And this is the Iron Dome and David Sling are probably the most well-known defense system, and I would assume that the other world powers absolutely have these systems, and they just must be very non-vocal about it, or they must have decided to keep it in a top secret capacity, because to not have one of these like an equivalent to the Iron Dome or an equivalent to the David Sling is not a great idea. Not a great idea in 2024 if you're a free world, or even if you're a communist world, because it's really, in 2024, it's really the fight of good and evil. It's full force. So the evil, it's restless, and the good, it's ready for the fight, and the good is just done with it, and they're not having it. So it's the fight between good and evil, it's heating up, and you can't see, and neither side is backing down, and neither side is gonna stop until this is the fight of good and evil. It's finished. So the capacity to counter ballistic missiles that go 6,000 kilometers an hour and go up over into satellite, orbit, are the ones that are going to change have any effect on trying to change economic power structures, which is really what, wars are about, the manipulation of the economies and the economic power structure. So the Iron Dome and David Sling were able to intercept 120 ballistic missiles, and they did it with, I guess, 100 to 99% accuracy or effectivity. So that would mean that a Iron Dome and David Sling anti-ballistic missile system has the capability to take down about 120 ballistic missiles simultaneously, and we could say that that is about the threshold for its capacity. So we would need to see 2 Iron Dome and 2 David Sling systems in the area if they were going to try to defend against a larger ballistic missile barrage. The cruise missiles, which are fast missiles under 2,000 kilometers an hour, which is a third of what a ballistic missile can do. A ballistic missile is going to go 6,000. A cruise missile is going to stay low, and it's going to go 2,000. And to defend against these effectively, you would use your Air Force and you would use your fighter jets. And then you would, be able to effectively use the Air Force fighter squadrons for taking, let's say, 30 cruise missiles effectively, and maybe up to a 100 if you could scramble and coordinate simultaneously enough of the your alliances and your air forces for like the Middle Eastern area. You could maybe expect to take out 100 cruise missile barrage. If simultaneously there was a great number of ballistic missile barrage, you could take out maybe under 200 ballistic missiles if you get enough, if you get maybe double the Iron Dome and Iron Sling into position. So that is what it would take. And as far as the production capacity for the missiles, so the country of Tehran is one of the 3 largest, or the country of Iran is one of the 3 largest in the area, next to Istanbul, or Cairo, next to Turkey and Egypt. So they would need to get, in which we know Turkey is an ally of Iran, and if there was to be any kind of war between Iran and Israel, that we have been warned there would be alliance making of Turkey and Iran. Therefore, you have 2 out of 3 largest countries in the region allied, and that's, what Israel would have to face logistically. Wars are always won with logistic or with technology. So, and then Tehran's ability to use its economic forces and focalizing his powers into replenishing his capacity for making these overwhelming strikes for production of the ballistic missiles and production of those cruise missiles needed to overwhelm. So this is what we would be looking at as far as a battle war between Iran and Israel. We would need a tremendous amount of alliance power surging into Israel in order to give them the logistical supplies to defend, much less counter, any offense by Iran. And what we do understand about this war between Iran and Israel is that there is a basic economic war between Iran and Israel. The war is very much based on sanctioning and nuclear capacity in Iran. So it's a penalization for nuclear development, for economically developing their nuclear project in Iran. It is an offensive economic strategy towards Iran by sanctioning for the because of and using the reason for of the sanctioning as, you know, you're developing a nuclear project. So these are politics and international law for proliferation of these very important influencers of economic power, such as ballistic missile. It is a very important driver of a capacity for changing influence in economic powers, that ballistic missile. And the economic competition between Iran and the West is a motivation for the West to basically be economically aggressive to Iran, causing sanctions. And this aggression that we see from Israel, where they are trying to take over Palestine, destroy Lebanon, destroy any leadership associated with Lebanon and the Iranian logistical supply for Lebanon. And then ultimately we see them also in Golan Heights maintaining that power and increasing out to Damascus. And it is an important recognition of the power in this area. That on this shore, the largest cities are Beirut with nearly 4 million and Amman with 4 million. And that the Amman is more secluded. He has less accessibility. Amman is not as accessible to the shore, and therefore it causes a limitation of economic power due to his inability to access the shore in a economically and logistically effective way, is limiting the power base of Amman. But whereas Beirut has this water access and it's strategically placed, and if you take the highway through the mountain pass from Beirut, it's a 90-minute drive to Damascus, which is the seat of power for Syria. Well, is now being contested whether Damascus truly is a seat of power. It is because it has focalized into this area here where the other large economic focuses of the economy are those other large cities. There's Damascus. So it's directly behind Beirut. But as for Syria as a whole, the Syrian economy is based on the shore and the river. And the great economic force of Aleppo here is more connected with the northern powers than it can be with the southern powers, because here is Damascus and Beirut, here is Aleppo, and here is Gaziantep, and the other large cities here of like Iskenderun and Antakya, and these other large cities here like Mirdin. So for Syria, economic power focalized into Aleppo with 2 million and Idlib with 3 million once its economic infrastructure is reconstructed. Then these power bases for Syria, Aleppo and Idlib, will be so strongly needing to integrate with what's near him. Big, strong power bases named Adana, Mersin, Gaziantep. And it continues along that high, like San Lurfia and Merdin, which I said were 2 million people of cities. So there's a big economic power here that cannot help but take and connect to that Syrian, those Syrian cities, Aleppo, Idlib. And then so you have down here this power base here. There you see Beirut, Damascus, Jerusalem, Amman. And there's Gaza City, the largest city in the area. Allahu Akbar.